Hello, everyone, and welcome to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thank you for joining us for today's event and for Concordia's open house. Today's event is Navigating the Supervisor Search, Strategies for Finding a Supervisor. And to help situate you, we're streaming to YouTube, and we are live from Fourth Space, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Here at Fourth Space, we work with our university community to mobilize knowledge, to co-create daily activities, examining research questions, projects, things in development across the university. And we're running this event as a live stream Zoom meeting also, and we welcome any comments, any questions, just pop those into the chat. I'll read those out at the end when there's a Q&A, so that would be wonderful if you did that. And same for those of you here in the space, just raise your hand. We'll bring a microphone over to you. And to get things started, I'll pass it over to our moderator for today, Debdeep Chatterjee, PhD in Management. Over to you. Welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, those of you who are here, and also those of you who are joining in our live stream. It's the open house, and we are all graduate students and ambassadors, graduate ambassadors of Concordia University. And we would be talking about navigating the supervisor search and strategies for finding a supervisor. We've all done it, so we just want to discuss it, and maybe you have questions about it, and we can share what we think and what we experienced. So with us, I would like to introduce my peers. So let's just go around the table and maybe talk, introduce yourself and your department, what's your research on. Before that, I should actually introduce myself again. I am Debdeep Chatterjee. I am a fifth-year student in the Department of Management. Broadly, my research is on corporate social responsibility. I try to understand why companies do certain things, take environmental positions, and what changes in society kind of drives them to do that, and what are some of the actions they engage in. So over to you.
Great introduction right there. Hi everyone, my name is Nada. I'm a PhD candidate from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. This is actually my last year in my PhD, and in my research I try to study how do we make wireless communications more intelligent by incorporating artificial intelligence. So I am at the intersection of basically intelligent networks and wireless communications. And I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Lee. It's my first year as a master's student in the physics department. I'm doing a thesis-based master's. My research is on perovskite nanoparticles. I work in the new applied science hub over at the other campus in Loyola.
Hi, nice to meet you. I am Yulei in the Department of Education, specialized in applied linguistics. And I am focusing on linguistic variation in writings to promote language education.
Hi, my name is Badewa Ajibade. I'm my first year PhD humanities research creation. My background is in film production, and right now at the PhD, film is my major. I'm a minor, and I have my minors in dance and music. My research at the moment is mostly on colonial and decolonial realities through the framework of contemporary arts, analyzing them through the framework of contemporary arts, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So we'll cover a few topics which we think is relevant for, which are relevant for finding supervisors and how to go about it. And we have, of course, we have been through the process, and even though they are a little bit different, there are many commonalities. And wherever you have questions, you could kind of note it down and put it in the chat, and we'll try to get back to it because we'll have about 20 minutes of Q&A. So that's the time we can use for discussing your specific questions. So we'll talk a little bit about the timeline, that is when you should start the process of, let's say, searching or getting ready, and how to make connections, and the research interest, aligning it, how to understand who are potential supervisors, funding opportunities, and in many cases we work in research labs, so the group dynamics and other opportunities and navigating relationships and general do's and don'ts. It's pretty simple, intuitive things that we should all keep in mind. So when it comes to timeline, the question is when. I mean, whether you're doing a PhD, master's, it's a major endeavor, and you kind of start thinking about it in advance. We'll try to go around and understand when we all kind of started the search process, because every department is also different and they have different expectations of how early, when you need to get your supervisor. So it would be good to know for all of us how you did your search process, or when did you begin it. Would you want to start off, Nada? Or, yeah.
Sure. So for my program, the requirement was to find a supervisor before applying, and I started looking for my supervisor about 3 months before the deadline, so the semester before the deadline for the application. So when I get questions about this, I really advise students to start looking at least like the minimum is a semester ahead or 6 months in advance, just so that they have enough time to study the potential supervisors and basically align what they want to do with what is actually available in terms of opportunities. So yeah.
Okay.
So what about you, Lee?
For the physics department here, you also need to find a supervisor before you apply. So, but I actually, after my bachelor's, I took a gap year to work in industry, and then I came back as an independent student for an additional year. So I had time, I had 2 whole years. It was always on my mind. I always knew I wanted to come back to grad school. So I always had time to talk to people and investigate research. And so it was a lot less pressure for me than I think for most people, but for sure, I mean, the earlier the better, right?
Thanks for sharing. I also had to look for my supervisor before the application. So in my case, the deadline of the application was December 1st. So I looked for the potential supervisor around summer, and then reached out to them around September when the semester starts, since most of the faculty members take a break during the summer. So I knew that they won't reply to my email, so that was my case.
Yeah, for me, I guess during my MFA, I didn't need to have a supervisor, but as soon as we got into the program, we knew that we were going to have to get one. So I had started from my year 1 just trying to know the people in the faculty and know their work. So by the time I got to my second year, I felt pretty sure about my supervisor, even though maybe I still made a change, but that's another topic. And for my PhD, as soon as I knew I wanted to come to Concordia, I just I think like Nada was saying, that's you don't wait, the earlier the better. That was the very moment I started looking into supervisors, because I knew that the program required a supervisor. So yeah, I do agree with my colleagues that the earlier the better.
Yeah. Actually, unlike, I'm going to share my experience also. Unlike, I feel like a lot of programs where you need supervisors, the business degrees, you don't typically need a supervisor before getting admitted or during your application, let's say. But I mean, you're right in the sense that I think every prospective student wants to kind of know who's in the department, to kind of already know what kind of research they want to do and they can do in that department. So it's good to be aware and start the search process early. Whether you need supervisors yeah, a supervisor for getting admitted or not. Nonetheless, it's better to yeah, start the search process early. So now that you have started searching, how do you contact these potential supervisors? And as Yule was saying, it's tricky, right? Because a lot of times you get these stories like, oh, I've sent out mails and like I didn't hear back from them. Happens quite a lot. So what were your strategies? And in general, I feel we are a mix of, like, let's say international students and people who are located in Montreal. It might differ, so we can share both in that case. So I don't want to start always with Nada. We can go around, yeah, maybe this time. Yeah.
How to contact potential supervisors? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think because obviously it's a fact that not everybody would go about communication the exact same way, right, due to, like, our personalities and, like, things like that. But I do feel like there's some essential, some do's and don'ts that you don't do. And like we said, like, one, I would say you don't contact your supervisor like right before your deadline, and then you're like, yeah, can you? I mean, you just don't do that, right? And then I feel like also, like, you recognize the fact that these people have a lot on their plates, like they're busy. Even when you contact them, you leave enough time for them to get back to you. You don't get, like, like on their next, like, reminder email the next day, the day after, like, they have things they're doing. And also, I just feel like, also when you contact your supervisors, you make sure that you share as much of your work as possible, because they don't know you. You're the one who knows them, who has been researching them. So you share as much of your work and yourself as possible, so that, by the time they get back to you, there's like there's kind of like a meeting point where, like, you're not starting from the ground. So those are just some of the things I would say. You?
I would say first, just review the website of each faculty member, which will clearly mention that what are their interests and what are their backgrounds, kind of like that. And then look for their publications as well, and at least read the abstract to show your interest to work with them, and then include that. And well, as an international student, email was the prior way to contact them. So throughout the email, be like clear, and we'll do the elevator speech with the writing. And then what else? Like, well, you could attach your CV and any kind of related works.
Right.
And also you can mention that you've attached those documents so that faculty members can easily find them. And I'll just pass it over.
Yeah, I think my experience for the most part was quite different, because I grew up in the area of Montreal and I knew I wanted to study here.
Yeah.
So most of my connections and contacts were made in person. I would, during my gap year and my year as an independent student, I would browse the websites for different universities in physics, for the physics program, and I would find what events they were hosting. Events like this, where I would have the opportunity to meet the faculty face to face.
Right.
And the ones that had research that interested me, I would approach either before or after. Sometimes I would go to like talks, like they would do research presentations. Departments usually host that type of thing. So I would just go and I would meet the professors afterwards, and the first thing I always asked was just for if we can set up a tour of their lab. And I found, surprisingly enough, most professors somehow have more time to give me a tour than to answer emails.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So I can honestly say no one ever told me no to come and visit the lab. So I had the
Okay.
opportunity to meet a lot of people and visit a lot of labs and figure out, what sort of environment am I looking at,
Yeah.
which was really beneficial.
Yeah.
And that's how I met my current supervisor.
Cool.
Yeah, that is actually interesting. I find that you have to put yourself in your potential supervisor's shoes, and you don't want to go through a huge email, right? You want to pitch yourself. You want to sell yourself to your supervisor and really highlight what makes you stand out in terms of your interests, your works, what you've done. And so I agree with Yulei and what she said. You really have to present yourself to this person and really show that you're interested genuinely. And my advice, don't go for ChatGPT and generate an email and basically send that email to your supervisor, because we as humans, we can read right through this, and you really want to humanize yourself in a way and show that you're actually interested. So yeah, always put yourself in their shoes and see if that is appealing. Like if you get a huge email like that, would you go through it? So
Right. Yeah.
kind of do the reverse job. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, but you wanted to say something? Oh, okay. Cool. No, what I'm hearing is contact in advance. Yes. And then be clear, and in your email show that you know them, like you have read their works, you are interested in what they do, but you have something complimentary to offer. Yeah, ChatGPT, or just don't basically cold emails which you kind of copy paste for 12 professors. Don't do that. It doesn't bode well on you. And I'm curious to know whether in general in your application process, whether that is honestly in Concordia or in anywhere, did you what about follow-ups? If you don't hear, what do you think about that? Would you, and perhaps this is more in the case of email than face-to-face, because do you do follow-ups, or how long do you wait? if you had that experience, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, even I think
Yeah.
I actually can comment on
yeah,
this as well.
for sure,
'cause,
yeah.
Obviously my first point of contact wasn't
Yeah,
the
yeah,
email, right?
yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
not just going to roll up to the professor's office
Yeah.
after 2 weeks and ask,
That's true.
how's it
yeah.
going, right? So I think it's important to give enough time between first and second contact to let your potential supervisor assess who you are as a person.
Okay.
And that's also important time for you to assess what kind of person your supervisor is as well. Right, because you might expect something really great from their research interests and stuff, but maybe from the brief conversations you've had, maybe your personalities don't blend too well, right? So it's important to let that sink in with you and let it sink in with the professor, I think. So usually I don't know, I would wait 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I would wait 2 weeks before second contact.
That's a good time, yeah.
But I
Yeah,
also
2 weeks,
had,
yeah.
right, like I said, I took 2 years off, so I had plenty of time.
Yeah.
I think if you're planning this 1 semester ahead,
Yeah.
1 week is also fine.
Yeah. I see.
1 to 2 weeks, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody wants to add to that, or have different thoughts, or any other thoughts, more or less? Yeah. Nada.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the time frame. Like 1 to 2 weeks is reasonable. Again, sometimes emails just get lost.
Yeah.
And
Totally. Yeah.
it doesn't mean that if you don't get a reply, that it's a dead end or they're trying to
Yeah.
ignore you. They could, the email could have been mixed up or something like that. So you can follow up politely, in
Yeah.
about a week or two, and then remind them of the email.
Yeah.
Maybe they saw the email and then they were like, okay, I'm gonna get back to it, but I'm just busy right now. So don't get demotivated per se.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, supervisors are humans at the end of the day, and they're just like us, and they get a lot of emails. So yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. And so the people who are with us today and trying to apply, I think these are some of the highlights that we feel is important: making contacts early, waiting, polite reminders, making emails, personalizing them, kind of tailoring it for each professor, expressing very clearly what your interests are and how it kind of aligns with them and their work. These are good practices in general, and that should be helpful. Talking of research interests, let's get a little more detailed about that, because it really is quite broad. So as we all kind of agree that you need to find common grounds, how do you express that, and how do you also do that homework, let's say, like, okay, finding that, because that's kind of coming from you, finding that with each person, each prospective or potential supervisor, how do you find that yourself, and how do you express that? What were your experiences? Lee, this time, let's start with you in the middle, you know, mix it up, yeah.
I found what I tried to do when speaking to professors a lot was really try and build a conversation and avoid the more typical interview style meetings.
Right.
So it's important to read what your supervisor has published in the past.
Yeah.
It goes a long way to show that you are actually interested and you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then to be able to, you can prep a couple questions, but what I found important too was that most of the professors I spoke to were just as interested in my interests as well.
Right, yeah.
And my supervisor had online, she had listed a few proposals of open projects for grad students to claim if they so chose to join her group. But through talking about my interests and her research, we actually kind of workshopped and developed a new thesis, a new project just for me, because she comes from a material science background, and I was a lot more interested in quantum mechanics. So we kind of found a way to blend those two together and build a project that now I'm very interested in and very invested in. So I think it's important to be well informed, but also not to forget that this is your life. This is going to be the research that you are doing for the next 2 to 4, even more years.
Yes.
So it's important to be verbal and let your professor know what your actual interests are as well.
That's a very good point. Yeah, yeah. How do we add on to that? Yeah.
Well, during my master's, I read a bunch of articles and publications written by my current supervisor. So I was interested in her interest area.
Okay.
And which was psycholinguistic aspects.
Okay.
And that's what I did during my master's. So I think it would be good to extend my area. Then after I got in here, I found out that her interest moved on to sociolinguistic aspects. But I was also open to other areas, other topics.
Yes.
And I also found out something related to sociolinguistic aspects also interested me. So now I'm doing it right now. So I guess it's good to have a solid interest, but it's also good to have open-minded to extend or like change a little bit of your interest area.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's good.
Badeva.
Okay, I think the one thing I'll add to this, which kind of has already been touched on, is that because I think sometimes we have the wrong impression that we have to match up perfectly with our supervisors, and I think that actually does take away from the opportunity to be innovative, to create, to like work in kind of like, new terrain. I feel like there has to be some commonality in terms of like what you identify in their work that you feel like, because if there's nothing in their work that maybe even draws you to the work, I'm not sure why you're approaching them in the first place. But like, there has to be something, there has to be that commonality like in their work in terms of like what piques your interest in what they're doing. And I feel like there's also, there could be room to build on that, and like for you to like bring both heads together to actually like, based on the differences you have, like I said, I don't think it needs to be 100% match up. There might be slight differences, but those differences could actually be really good in creating like, the project like you're gonna create and gonna work with, almost like what happened with Lee, right? So for me, like, it's okay if your supervisor, because I remember like one of the supervisors I spoke with, this wasn't at Concordia, this was at another university, and then she was like, I really love your work the way you love mine, but like, I'm kind of leaning more to this side, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine, that's precisely why I want you, because I also feel like I want you to be able to like, I don't want to be so narrow-minded in my thinking. I want to be able to like, open up my thinking to see what else like, could actually add to what I have. So that's just one thing I would add.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with my colleagues. So research is not homework. So you could start with potential research interests, and when you come into the program, when you take a deep dive, you could change those interests, and that is okay, and that is not really something uncommon. And something also that I'd like to point out, like for example, for myself, I came from an electronics background, and I came in here into the electrical and computer engineering department, and it was really okay to browse other relevant fields. Like, so if you come from electrical, you could also go into computer science that is relevant. You could go into bio applications that are related to electrical. So there is some sort of flexibility. I get this question a lot, like some people did their undergrad in a specific domain. Are they restricted? Can they do something in their master's that is not totally like different, but still related? And the question is yes. And I wish I knew that when I started. That would give me more options to browse and basically pursue. So yeah.
Yeah. I hear you, and my experience was a little different because it's also before, like, I think you're all talking from the point of matching while you're applying, but I kind of like joined, and while I was taking the courses in the first year, it was a little bit of like self-exploration. Not exploration, like I knew what I was broadly interested in, but kind of like using those courses to know it better, and finding that common ground in different ways can come from different things. For example, I knew I wanted to do quantitative research. So I knew that was an important part of my search process because it's really different worlds. Qualitative, quantitative can be in certain sense. So I wanted to always work with someone who worked with in quantitative method and not. But honestly, like my research is not exactly match. It doesn't exactly match with what my supervisor was doing at that point. But broadly, it was under social evaluation. So I kind of like pitched like, okay, there are synergies. So try to think of synergies. Maybe like as all of us, it's like what you bring to the table as well as what they bring to the table, and they are equally, as you were saying, they are equally interested in your work, kind of how that expands their horizon, and of course, to some extent, that plays a role. Okay, well, moving on. How are we doing on time? We are not doing great. So, okay, funding, important reality of grad life. In general, what was your experience, expectation? How did you clarify your expectation? Whether it is through school or like, the research group you're joining, it can be hard to understand. Sometimes it's a bit opaque. So if you just want to share your experience. Nada, yeah. Maybe you
Sure,
go.
I'll start first this time. I get this question a lot about funding, and the answer is like it's faculty specific, but it is an important question to ask. So I wouldn't advise you to like right out the bat in the first email to start asking, well, do you have funds for me? This is
Yeah.
my research XYZ. But at least pose the question, because you could have access to faculty research funding. But again, this question is important. It is a reality to support your research. And so you gotta ask it, but at least make sure that you are already on a common ground with your supervisor. You both wanna work together, and then maybe start talking finance. So.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I can add, for me, the most, or I don't know about most, but a lot of program websites will have that information, what
Yeah.
type of funding you're guaranteed, readily available for you. But if it's unclear or if it's not readily available, it might be smart also, and this is what I ended up doing because I had some confusion, to actually ask someone other than your supervisor, right? There are graduate program recruiters, there are people who work in administration, there are people who work in funding. If you can find those emails, they're going to be much more prepared to answer those questions. And to be honest, sometimes your supervisor might not know either.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunities that are kind of like tucked away and hidden on the website. But there is someone at the school whose responsibility is funding. So finding who that person is and emailing them about it can be very beneficial.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, for me as well, there was a clear statement regarding the funding in our faculty website.
Yeah.
So I recommend you to read carefully
Yeah.
the website, like
Carefully.
every tab, every single word, and then you could contact like faculty program director or any funding recruiters. Also, you could ask your potential faculty members to get any opportunities for TA-ships or RA-ships or any external sources. So yeah, I would say that.
I kind of think you guys covered everything.
That's okay. I was wondering, like this RA, research assistantship, and teaching assistantship. Do you all do that? Like, did you kind of know that what opportunities were there, or kind of like once you started, you figured out by yourself? What was your experience?
Well, I did my bachelor's here at Concordia as well.
Yeah.
And the physics department is rather small here, so even as an undergrad, I was TAing already.
Oh, okay, cool.
And through talking to the faculty members, I knew that as a grad student, that position would be guaranteed to me as
Right.
part of my funding.
Right.
So, and there are certain programs where their grad students are guaranteed a position as a TA as part of their funding.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's program specific,
Right.
so
Yes.
that's something that you need to inform yourself about.
Right. And have that expectation, like in the sense when you're TAing, you are also working, so you need to balance that, like how much you're working, so that it doesn't get overwhelming for you. Yeah. And also I think like maybe we should mention a bit about external fundings, the SHRC and FRQs, they could be very useful. Do you have any experience with those? The external funding, the Quebec government or the Canadian governments?
Yeah, this is my first
Yeah.
year as a master's student, so I'm
Yeah.
aware of them. I'm working on my proposal
Right.
now for
Right.
the NSERC
Right.
funding.
Right. Yeah.
But I have no
Yeah,
I have no
n-
experience. I
not
don't know. Has
or
anyone
anybody-
else applied for those?
I have the experience, and I know that SHRC is for the domestic
Right.
students
Right.
and FRQ for the international students. So I
FRQ
would,
is like open.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Open to everybody.
Oh, okay, okay. So I was only able to apply for the FRQ. And Concordia also offers some workshops and writing sessions,
Right.
writing proposal
Yes,
sessions for
yes.
the FRQ and SHRC as well. So if you're interested, you could find those information
Yeah.
as
yeah,
well.
Yeah. No, I think that kind of application for these external awards is good, not just because you, like, if you make it, you get money, but also I think early on we start this practice of communicating research to external parties who are very important stakeholders. So I think that developing that language is important to kind of, because of course you are not going to get every grant you're going to apply to, but it's good to have the habit of application and developing those vocabularies. Okay, so research group dynamics. Okay, yeah. So who you will work with. I know this is often in science, engineering, more like prominent aspects than in other disciplines. So whoever wants to answer are like is in the best place, because I'm not. I don't know, neither Badeva and Yuli. Also, you said like it was more solo, like, right? Okay, so maybe you two.
Yeah, for me, this was almost as big of a deciding factor for me than choosing a supervisor.
Okay, wow.
Because choosing my supervisor is one thing, but on a day-to-day, I'll be working with a research group.
That's true.
Right? All the other students are going to be there as well, and working well with that research group inevitably will be a large factor in my success as a grad student.
Mm-hmm.
So finding a research group that melds well with your work ethic, I think is very important, almost as important as picking a supervisor. And if you want to work solo, right, then you can find a supervisor who has less students, who has a smaller research group, right? These are all things that I think are important to consider.
Nada?
Yeah, definitely. So again, I am from an electrical engineering background, and I agree with what Lee said. So when you choose a supervisor, you're also choosing a research lab, and you're going to be working with these people for the next 2 to 4, maybe more years, and aligning yourself with the right people will help you flourish and advance as well. So again, some people work well in team settings, some people like collaborative projects, and others prefer working on their own. And so there are hints. Either you could ask potential graduate students in their lab, or students that already graduated, you can contact them through LinkedIn or things like that to just understand what were the day-to-day dynamics in the lab and how the supervisor manages the lab as well, because at the end of the day, he's a manager, and every person has their own managing style or management style. And so you could either ask other students, or you could look up their research projects and see how many were like the collaborating parties on that project, and that will give you a hint of their style, whether they encourage individual work or collaborative work. So yeah.
Right. And so in your application process, so while you were applying, you kind of figured out by yourself, like what was this, who are the people working in this lab, or how did that, or did you ask the professors, can I talk to your lab members?
That's actually a good question. So at the time, so my supervisor had his his website, and he had current students in his lab.
Yeah.
And so I contacted some of the students. Some of them replied, some didn't, which is, again, they're humans, and they're busy. And so actually some of these conversations influenced my decision to choose my current supervisor, because I got really positive feedback about him as a person, and as well about his work dynamic, and that it actually encouraged me to be in the lab, because again, you're choosing to be there for a long term, amount
Yeah,
of years.
yeah,
So
absolutely,
it is
yeah.
important to choose well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. That's good to know. So I think also like this shows the importance of really exploring the person you are like considering to be your potential supervisor, kind of figuring out if they have a page like that where you know like kind of like who they work with and reaching out to them. So all that goes a long way to make a good decision. Okay, so opportunities. So some of the academic, professional opportunities that you expect, and how do you clarify that beforehand, or how do you know it's going to be met while you in this process while you search for a supervisor?
Yeah, for me, in science, publication and exposure are two very important things. So when I was choosing my supervisor, a big thing that influenced my decision was whether or not I was picking a supervisor who had the time and funds to provide to me the opportunities to publish and to show my research at conferences, to travel to show my research, to meet new people, to broaden my network. Those were all things that I think are very important to consider beyond who the supervisor is and what research you'll be doing.
Right.
It's important to be aware of what opportunities you'll have as well, right? And it goes into the group dynamics as well, because if you join a research group that is super saturated and a very large research group, chances are each individual researcher will have less of those opportunities because of funding and time and et cetera. So depending on what you want and what skills you want to develop beyond what you're expecting to learn in your degree, these are things that were important for me to consider while choosing a supervisor.
You have anything to add? Okay. We are pressed for time, so let's go through the next couple of topics quickly, and maybe we can integrate some of those themes when we answer the questions, because I see there are some questions in the chat and perhaps in the room. So yeah, general like relationship dynamics. It's hard to know perhaps at the offset, like kind of you don't know them as person, but in general expectations. Anything like while you're doing your PhD or master's, anything that kind of sticks to you that these are important practices that you follow to make relationships better?
I mean, I guess one thing I would say, very quickly, is that you, as much as like, you know, you want to find someone that like, you know, almost like what I was saying too when I was speaking about like a 100% match, like, you know, in terms of like personality and all of those things, you're not going to find like 100% like, you know, perfect like life partner or anything, supervisor. That's not the idea. You have to be willing to compromise a little bit. You're dealing with people who are like, you know, specialists in their field, who have done so well, who are kind of might be opinionated, you know, and believe in their work and their ways of doing things, you know. So I think one thing maybe it's important to see is that like they could also be willing to compromise if they had to. But I feel like once you are willing to make some compromises, and the supervisor as well, then those differences might be easier to, but again, like I mentioned, differences are not always a bad thing. You know, sometimes like, you know, they help you see different perspectives, so they help you keep an open mind. So for me, I would say that's the most important thing, but don't expect someone that like, you know, everything is just like, it's all rosy. There's not a single like,
Okay. Do's and don'ts. Let's just try to maybe integrate that while we take the questions. So should we start with the chat or in the room?
Are there any, excuse me, I'm coughing into the microphone. Yes, we have some questions on Zoom, and we had a couple questions come in through YouTube. I can read those out, but I wonder, if there's anyone in the room that has any questions, just raise your hand. We'll get a microphone over to you. And I'll start with some of the questions from Zoom, and I know you have already kind of touched on some of these already, and so maybe someone else, if you did already answer this one, maybe someone else wants to take a different slant at it. The first question was from Nelson, and Nelson was asking, what if none of your potential supervisors answer your email? Can the university help you find one, or what would you do in that scenario?
Anybody wants to? The university helps you find one.
So, like, I'm gonna be speaking about my own experience from what I've seen. I can't generalize this to all Concordia. Like, from my experience, the department doesn't necessarily guide you through finding a supervisor. You have to do the homework yourself. And from my experience, your admission application is not likely to move forward if your supervisor is not aligned or is not going to pick you from the pool. So, like, this is again for the electrical. You have to first contact, you have to make the research, you have to find the supervisor, make them agree to endorse your application before you deposit your admission. But I'm not aware, like in my department, there isn't any guidance through. You have to do your own homework, but maybe in other faculties that would be the case.
Do you have any experience or perspective to this?
I just want to add something quickly, which is the fact that for me, in the world of academia, and I feel like when you're fortunate enough to get into this world, you realize that, there isn't like any like malice. It's like, if people are willing to to talk to you, to help you, even sometimes to refer you to somebody else who like might have done the kind of work you're looking to do. So I would say if you're having that kind of situation, I think you should like stay at it and not like get discouraged, because people do want to help. They're not trying to I don't know, maybe like in the industry, things might be a bit different, but in academia I feel like if you speak honestly and then you're asking people, like I think Nada had said, like sometimes people could forget, your emails could go down, but I feel like if you reach out, you send a reminder, like Lee also spoke about, after 2 weeks or whatever it is, you should be able to like hear back from someone.
Yeah, so what I hear, like in certain departments, to answer the question is like, depending on the department, maybe as you were saying, your application will not even move forward if you're not like vetted per se, let's say by a supervisor. But in other departments, maybe like the chair or somebody can like they may have certain system of helping new students find supervisors. So it really depends on department and what are the procedures for the application in that department. Maybe we can move forward to.
Yeah, some of the next, I think the couple of the next questions from Richard and Marcus and Kelly were really more about what to do if you don't hear back from your supervisor, or if you're not sure why they're not replying to your emails, and I think you did speak to those earlier. But there was a question also from YouTube that was maybe more specific. Maybe this one would be a good one for Badwa, I'm not sure. And it was saying, do you have any general advice for potential students entering an interdisciplinary program, especially when you're balancing communication with multiple supervisors or using their experiences? I don't know if that applies at all, but that was one question.
Yeah. Badewa, you're not in Indy, right? Yeah. Yeah, maybe you could.
Sorry, the question is a bit loaded. I'm just trying to refresh. Balancing communication while utilizing the experience. Thank you. What I would say, I'm not in the Indie program in the humanities, but we do kind of share some similarities. General advice, like that's general. Okay, I would say entering the program. If you've been accepted and you're entering the program, I guess that means you have a supervisor, or anyway.
Yeah, but you have multiple.
Yeah. Oh,
across.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, usually you're gonna have a main supervisor anyway.
Right.
They're not gonna just have five. Like I, for instance, now I have 4 people on my panel. 3 supervisors, one like another kind of like mini advisor, but there is like a lead supervisor that I have. And I feel like when you have like, you are going to have a lead supervisor. When you have that format, you will communicate more with your lead supervisor. Now, depending on how much interest the other supervisors have in your work or how you communicate or your relationship, you might end up spending some time with them or like speaking with them or like tapping into like, their own experience. Sometimes you could also, and these things are flexible, right? They change. Sometimes one of your other supervisors could become your lead supervisor, and sometimes, you could decide to go an entirely different way and have other supervisors. So, but I would say that it does help to have a focal point, which is your lead supervisor, and usually that's the person you're dealing with in terms of like major things, like running your funding and like, the program and like your courses and all of that stuff. So, yeah, but it's also pretty straightforward to still have a relationship with the other ones, but just knowing you have a main supervisor, I'd say.
Yeah. So I guess how the indie works is that you have like interdisciplinary like supervisors from different like art and engineering or things like that. So that's and I think it is a bit different from other PhDs in that sense. But having one, like that expectation of like having one as a lead, I don't know if that makes sense, but like who would play a major role. Perhaps it's good because like you don't want like, you want some like harmony in the chaos, like you don't want pure chaos, right? So you have to find the synergy between, and perhaps like before starting the PhD, having that expectation set might help in the process so that you know what to draw on from each person. And I really think that like indie is special in that, and in that regard. Perhaps it's not so much of an issue, but you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have some colleagues who are co-supervised, so it might be a similar experience. And the way they usually manage it is that you set, it's the student's responsibility, you try and set like a monthly meeting with both of your supervisors so that you can deal one-on-one with them for the most part, and then at least once per month you check in with them both, and then you can kind of, that way the communication isn't lost in the drift. But if you're a potential student and it's before your application, but I'm assuming both of these supervisors have already agreed to supervise you, then I think that shouldn't be that hard to manage. I think organizing a monthly meeting with the both of them, just to keep everyone on the same page, is how, in my experience, is how most people manage that.
Anybody else wanted to chime in on that? Nada or Julie? Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I think some of the other questions in the chat are very good questions, but very specific to specific programs and challenges. And I just wanted to mention that it's best to probably contact your recruiter for those types of questions. And also just wanted to ask if there was anyone in the room that had any questions. We could, happy to bring a mic over if you do have them. Okay. And if anyone else online would like to pop any last minute questions in here. Oh, maybe we have one in. Oh, no. Sorry, I'm just looking at all of these. Okay, I think that's it for questions. Go ahead, Isa.
Quick comment for people online in the audience. We have attached a YouTube link where they have in detailed about the external funding opportunities, and also the Concordia website where you can find all the opportunities as well there.
Meanwhile, we can talk about some of the do's and don'ts. I feel like you might want to start. Do you have something in your mind that you want to share throughout the application process? Some things you did, which you feel like really worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're all sitting here in the program, so we did we did things right.
You're done. You don't know if it worked. That's true.
Yeah, but I think what I would say is, which I'm just gonna kind of reiterate things that we already mentioned, which is obviously you doing things on time, in terms of your research on time, in terms of contacting your supervisors on time. It's a very bad way to start if it doesn't even look as if, it looks as if the person you're contacting was an afterthought, as opposed to I have actually been doing some research on you, and then because I feel like that changes the type of communication, the face of the communication very much. If you approach somebody and as you send them an email, you're speaking about their work and speaking about like specific things about their work, what you liked, and then I feel like they already have more of an interest and you're probably going to get more. You have a much higher chance of getting a faster response because they've seen that, like, you have put in that time and that work, and now you can't put in that time or that work if you are doing it so late, or you're leaving it to the last minute. So I would say, obviously, like, that idea of, like, having, like, enough time to research the program, having enough time to research your supervisors, even, like, someone we have in the audience is doing her research really early for her PhD. So, like, it's go to open houses, go to things like that, like, way ahead of time. So I would say that's one thing I would say.
Yeah.
One thing I can add on is that once the application process starts, just open your file and then check all the details, like all the documents that are required, and then you can always submit it later. So read the instructions and check the details and save any files if you're ready. So that will be my last one.
I would add, I found when communicating with potential supervisors, there's kind of a weird shift that happens where you go from an undergraduate student to a graduate student.
Yeah.
Where you're no longer, like, you're still a student, but you're more of a peer to your supervisor now, right? You're doing research with them. You're working with them. So it's important to stay professional always.
Yeah.
But there's no need to be intimidated by them. There's no need to talk to them like they're, so above you that you'll never reach them, right? I think it's important to stay grounded and realize that you're more and more becoming peers with these people than anything else. So stay professional, but talk to them as humans, not as potential supervisors, right? They're not a means to an end. They're someone you're going to be working with for the next long time.
Yeah, and to add over that, again, you're talking to them. They're basically a human just like you, and basically, I get a lot of questions from students and a lot of anxiety towards basically making point of contact but not getting a reply. But you have to remember it's a two-way street. As much as you want them to be your supervisor, they also want students. Their success depends on the research they do with their students. And it's really a two-way street. It's not one directional. As much as you want them, they want you to. But sometimes there is a cap on the number of seats. So sometimes all the seats are taken. Some of them may not have the funding to host you. And so you have to keep that in mind. It's not really a one-way street. And so don't let that discourage you. And we got a question about, like, if I don't get a reply from all the potential supervisors that I contact, this is actually the worst case scenario. So this is, I find this fearful thinking, and it's really, I get this a lot from grad students or like potential grad students, but it's really fearful thinking. There's no way that you will contact all of them and you won't get a reply.
Yeah.
And for me personally, even when I contacted supervisors that didn't have seats, they had the courtesy of replying back and telling me that we're sorry but we don't have enough seats right now, or we can't host you. So don't let that fearful thinking stop you from pursuing your grad studies.
Perfect. Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, either online or in the room. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
It would be, what if everyone you're asking? The question would be if you're asking all potential supervisors, and all the ones that could be aligned with our fields or interests are not replying or saying no because there are no more seats or anything. And we have to face potential supervisors, but with interest getting far and far and far away from our interests. So isn't it getting more compromised and
Yeah.
to pursue research? Like, okay, I can have a supervisor, but would it be a really good fit?
Right.
I mean, I can't speak from experience here, but I think that might be a good opportunity to start looking at co-supervision. Maybe the supervisors you were looking into that align with your research really well don't have the funding for a full student, but they do have the funding for half a student. So they can co-supervise successfully with someone else who has more funding. That way you have a way into their research without having the full commitment from the supervisor side. Another option, which is a little more extreme, which is what I did, was I just came back as a grad student last year as an independent grad student. So undeclared, no supervision, just taking grad courses. And then during that time, I was able to basically extend my deadline, right? So now instead of having one semester to find a supervisor, I have a whole year. And once you enter the program full time, all those classes you took, those credits are transferable. So now I'm entering my master's, but I don't have any classes to take anymore because I took all my credits last year. So there are ways where you can still go to school and still participate in the department and still get involved before being accepted, before finding a supervisor. Obviously, this kind of only applies to local students, unfortunately, but if you know that this is what you want, then there are means to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I think it's time. So good luck and thank you everybody, and good luck who are searching for their supervisor or in the application process. And thank you to everybody here. And we'll see you later. And thank you.
I'm trying to clap and hold a mic. That's bad. Clap, 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 clap. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for moderating. Thank you all for coming in. Amazing insights, and I can't imagine that it's not helpful for future students, people considering coming to Concordia, and actually just really great to hear your stories and perspectives. Thank you everyone for joining us online, appreciating your questions. Hope we could provide some answers there. We're going to be closing up the Zoom and the live stream now, but just want to let you know this remains available on our YouTube channel if you want to revisit it. You can search the transcript even for keywords and find moments where people are, there's some really great answers in here. That's all. Thank you for joining us for Open House. We have another discussion later on this afternoon, so join us at 1. Thank you.